The rest of the crew had died. Mira was in a spacesuit clinging to the side of the spaceship, trying to make necessary repairs to the life support systems. While they rested, the ship had passed through a small asteroid field. Mira had always been a light sleeper, so had heard the small pings hitting the side of the ship first. She had been awake and on her way to the flight deck when the alarms went off, signifying a drop in life support abilities. Just like on a plane, you get yourself situated before helping others to get safe. By the time she had finished getting her suit on, air readouts were so low that no one else could have made it into their suits. She had tried to get Roger, the captain, and also the closest crew member to the suits into his, but he was already dead. With everything offline, even CPR was impossible. Mira was a glorified mechanic on this ship. Granted, she could fix anything and was an expert in mechanical engineering among other fields of study. Here, she was Mrs. Fix-It. She had had no choice and ended up jettisoning the rest of the crew. She would have liked to return their bodies to their families, but there was no means of refrigeration on board. Assuming she could get the ship working again, they would just begin to stink while they decomposed. And if she couldn't get the ship working again, she didn't want to slowly die to the smell of rot. Most of the life support machinery was in the craft. She had already repaired all of those, and her heart sank, knowing she only had one tank of oxygen left and a spacewalk to repair the one bit of machinery on the outside of the craft. Finally, with 1 hour of air left, the last wires and electronics were replaced. She checked the readout on her arm. Good. Life support systems were coming back online. She would have never been able to do all of this if her crew had survived and were also using up the oxygen tanks. She crawled back to the ship and, once safe, checked the readouts to ensure proper air quality. Everything was good, so she happily removed her helmet and took a grateful lungful of air. She hooked an empty air tank to the refill station and headed to the flight deck to do a systems check. Hopefully, she would still be able to direct the ship or even communicate with Earth. While she could drive this ship, it was not something she was very good at, and she certainly wouldn't be able to land it anywhere. Mira checked the thrusters next. Her left thruster wasn't working. She brought up the exterior camera and was able to see that the thruster looked like it had taken a direct hit from an asteroid. She wouldn't know how bad it was until she got out and looked. In the meantime, she went to storage for spare parts. After loading up a bag, she went back to the air tanks and switched out the now full tank for an empty one. Mira decided she wanted full air tanks before anything else. She set the repair bag down next to her spacesuit and attached a full air tank to the suit. She didn't want to report back to Earth just yet. They would ask her if she had done all the necessary repairs to the ship, and then likely chew her out for jettisoning the corpses of her crew. She didn't get why they would expect her to store them. She was a good 3 light years from Earth. Messages took days to receive. While propulsion was much quicker than ever imagined, communication had not kept up. Over the last 20 years, the propulsion secrets of spacecraft that had crashed-landed on Earth nearly a century ago were unlocked. The first voyage using this new technology was to explore the solar system more extensively than satellites had previously. This was the second voyage, which was to visit our closest neighboring star system, Alpha Centauri. It was supposed to take a week to get there, 2 weeks to explore and take readings, but not to land, and then a week to get back. Once all of the oxygen tanks were full, Mira went out with her tools and spare parts bag to begin working on the broken thruster. She was about halfway finished when she caught movement from the corner of her eye.
What is that?
She focused her eyes and realized it was another ship.
Oh, oh, oh,
She chanted as she pressed the button at her belt to retract the guide rope to pull her rapidly back to the ship.
Real freaking aliens, what do I do?
She panicked as she removed the spacesuit and headed to the flight deck. A strange, loud noise hummed through the machinery. Mira had never heard that noise before. She used the exterior cameras to see what was going on and saw that the other ship was right over her own. An opening appeared and then a light struck the ship. There had been some movement of Mira's spacecraft, but she felt it all stop when the light hit.
Is that a goddamn tractor beam?
Her much smaller craft was brought into the larger, and she soon felt a small jarring as her vessel was set down. There was a new sound that reminded Mira of sonar, as the noise seemed to start from one end of the ship and travel, getting louder and louder as it came to her and the nose of the ship. Once it had gone the whole length of the ship, it stopped. Mira used the cameras to see if she could see what was going on. A panel of the wall opened, and a group of beings walked in. They appeared to be speaking to each other, but these cameras didn't provide sound. The aliens were lizard-like in appearance and coloring, except they all had short hair. Were they lizards or mammals? Their hands reminded her of bat feet. They appeared to be dexterous like her own, but there didn't appear to be any nails or claws. They were a dark green, and each alien had a slightly different shade of the dark green. The heads didn't have a pronounced snout like many Earth reptiles, but more like a turtle's face. She didn't see any teeth, or at least none that she recognized as teeth, so at least that was good, right? They were bipedal and had tails. They also all appeared to have uniforms on. Mira was panicking. Part of her mind was cataloging every nuance of these aliens, while the rest mentally repeated "oh sh*" while it ran in circles. It was quite an odd feeling. The one in the center had more embellishments on his uniform, and it waved its hand in what was unmistakably a hello gesture.
It waved hello,
She gasped, and then it appeared to wait. There were no external speakers on this craft, and due to no microphones on the cameras, she didn't even know what they sounded like. She could do a scan, she supposed, but it wasn't meant for something so close. It was meant to scan nearby planets. However, she could at least find out what kind of atmosphere surrounded her ship. She would know if it was breathable, if the pressure was survivable. So she ran the scan. She watched the aliens to see if they would react. The sound of the scan was too high for humans to pick up. It was, however, in a dog's range, so if they reacted or didn't react, it would still tell her something about them. One of them put a hand to the side of its head and appeared to say something. The other two seemed to reply but made no visible yes or no symbol.
So they can hear it, but it doesn't cause discomfort.
She mumbled as she looked over the readout. Air concentrations were similar to Earth's, but the atmospheric pressure was lower. This would be like being up on a high mountain. It would be difficult to breathe, especially if she went from in the ship to out there without warning. The aliens were moving again. They found the door, and it was opened. She had forgotten to lock it from the inside after coming back on board. Mira cursed herself. She switched to the interior cameras, which did give sound and could be broadcast over. They were speaking to each other as they looked around, poking at the discarded spacesuit and the oxygen tanks. One pointed to the American flag insignia, as well as the NASA one, and the other two replied, but again made no other body movement or gesture. They continued down the hall, and the same one that pointed out the exterior camera pointed out the interior one. Their language sounded like hisses and clicks. The same one looked directly at the camera and waved. This time, Mira heard the language that went with it. She pressed the intercom button. She knew they probably wouldn't understand her either, but at least she could try. There was a click when the microphone went live.
I can't understand you.
The aliens startled briefly with a widening of their eyes. They chattered briefly to each other. Then one of them left quickly, and in the other exterior cameras, she saw it went to a panel at the wall and appeared to speak at something. Inside, the two there looked around curiously, but otherwise waited. Outside, a few minutes passed before a door opened and a fourth alien handed over a device to that alien. It then quickly rejoined the other two. It handed the device over to the leader.
What is that?
She didn't know if they understood her or if it was guessing based on it being a likely question. It moved close to the camera and then turned its head to what appeared to be an ear. It pulled the fur away from an area behind the ear, and Mira could see what looked like old scar tissue. It moved back, and the other two did the same to show identical scars. It then mimed using the device on one of the other aliens. It then pointed to that alien's mouth, and then its ear, and then reversed, pointing to its mouth to the alien's ear.
Translator.
Mira supplied. There was no reaction. They waited a little bit, but when Mira didn't appear, they continued forward, looking into each room as they passed it. Mira was still scared. She grabbed a hammer from her tool bag, as well as a screwdriver. It was a poor selection of weapons, but they were as familiar to her as anything else would be. The door opened, and she was now staring at 3 aliens who each stood at around 6.5 feet tall. Mira was only 5'2" and tiny in proportion, but still, she stood in a fighting stance. All 3 of the aliens flicked out their tongues in the way snakes do to taste the air. She hadn't noticed it on the cameras, but the rational cataloging part of her mind noted that they each had a bubble around them. It didn't seem to get in their way. She then remembered their atmosphere was different from hers, and it likely allowed them to be here in her higher-pressured spaceship. As they tasted the air, the aliens tasted her fear. Their eyes widened at that knowledge. After a few clicks and hisses from the leader, the other 2 retreated from the room. The leader then pointed to her makeshift weapons and pointed to the floor. Its voice got lower and more gentle-sounding as it continued to click and hiss at her. As Mira tried to decide whether or not to disarm herself, the controls started to beep, indicating an incoming message.
Shh.
She swore. She pointed at the leader with the hammer.
You, go over there.
She pointed to an area out of camera range. Mira then turned to the controls, set her hammer and screwdriver in the tool bag, and pressed a button that closed the door to the flight deck. There was startled hissing from the leader, but she pointed over to the area she wanted it to go. Go! When it moved, she took a look around, took a deep breath, and answered the call. The command center back home would be able to tell how long it took to answer, so she didn't want to cause any alarms back home. She honestly wasn't sure how the government would handle the knowledge of aliens and first contact just yet, so she would start by pretending everything was as it had been before the alien abduction. Sisveta still couldn't understand this strange creature. It was much more expressive than his own people, and the sense of its emotions were pretty universal. It now smelled of both fear and resignation. What was happening on this ancient style of spacecraft? It had at least put down those primitive weapons. He would need to know what this alien said, so used the recording device on his chest so he could review this after the alien's language was added to the translator. Even after he injected the translator behind its auditory canal, it would understand him and his subordinates, but only after it spoke and responded to him would the translator begin deciphering the new language. The video message came up. Commander Morris began speaking.
Good day, crew. You should be about a day out from Alpha Centauri. I'm excited to see the images and readings you will be sending back. Because you are so far away, and this is only our second run with this technology, let me know how it's running and if you are feeling any discomfort from the flight speed. Your families have sent videos. Any return videos will be sent back to your families, of course. I look forward to your report.
Mira wiped a tear from her cheek and then took a deep breath before turning on the camera feed to respond.
Good evening, Commander Morris. I have bad news to report to you. Early this morning, I was awakened to the noise of something hitting the sides of the ship. I was on my way to investigate when the alarm sounded, signifying a loss of life support. I hurried to a suit, and by the time I was secure, life support had completely failed. I checked on my crewmates, but they were all dead with no means to even attempt CPR. Once I realized how badly damaged the systems were, I jettisoned the dead to avoid the decomposition to potentially damage the air quality, and it took me 10 hours to make all life support repairs. Once all air tanks had been refilled, I assessed the rest of the systems and found the propulsion to be damaged in the portside thruster. I believe the damage was caused by a previously unknown asteroid field. I am exhausted and will work on propulsion tomorrow after I get some sleep. Please send my regrets to my crewmates' families. I believe I will be able to repair the ship and continue the mission. Mira Rodriguez, out.
She turned off the camera and bowed her head, the exhaustion showing itself now that the adrenaline was leaving her. Sisveta took advantage of the alien's lowered guard and sprang at it, using his superior strength to hold it while he injected the translator. It screamed in pain and held itself at the injection site as its red life fluid ran down its neck.
That damn alien attacked me.
Mira thought as she curled into a ball and sobbed. The pain was unbearable. The injection site burned, and she now had a debilitating migraine. She could feel alien hands on her, cleaning up her neck.
Click, click, re. Hiss, click, hurts. Click pain, click, go away soon. You should start click to be able to understand me. Don't move until the burning and head pain are gone and the light no longer bothers you. It's okay, little alien.
Mira chortled at being called an alien, even though to this alien, she was in fact the alien here. The noise sent a fresh stab of pain through her head, and she cried out at it.
Foolish alien, you must stay still. When you are ready, I will need you to speak to me. You must give more than yes or no answers. Your language is new to the translator, so I will not understand you at first. I will also ask you to repeat certain phrases. I look forward to being able to communicate with you properly. Your ship is very old-looking to me, but everything is all brand new. Why is your technology so old? Where in the galaxy are you from? I have so many questions.
As he spoke to her, he stroked its strange fur. How odd that it was so long and only on its head. It was very soft, like a new hatchling's fur. The alien was so strange looking at him. He saw the hardened tips on its fingers and wondered if it had toes and if they also had hardened tips. What was the purpose of these tips? After a few more minutes, Mira moved to a sitting position.
Are you feeling well?
Yes, I'm a little sore still, but the burning and pain have gone away.
Sisveta was surprised at how short a time it took for this alien to be ready to begin. He hadn't had to calibrate his own translator as his language had already been added to the collective, but he had been in pain for quite a bit longer than this alien.
I will need you to repeat a few sentences for me. It will help the translator to understand your language faster.
Okay, shoot.
Mira replied. He took that to mean to begin. He pulled out his portable and brought up the translator phrases on it and set it to begin calibration.
I do not understand. Speak slower.
He pointed to her, and she waited on the translation, and then repeated it in English.
I am in need of scale liquid because my shed is coming.
Mira bit her lip to keep from laughing at the phrase. Once she was calm, she repeated it. Sisveta also found this phrase humorous, as his species did not shed and suspected this alien also did not shed.
Mystery creates wonder, and wonder is the basis of click-click-hiss-click desire to understand.
Mira was a little confused because she wasn't sure if that was a translation error or not. She did her best.
What did you just call me?
Sisveta hissed angrily. At the alien's sudden fear scent, he calmed and soon realized it had not been speaking, its own language, but had switched to his own.
Click, click, hiss, click did not translate for you, did it?
No, but I heard the translation and I'm sorry. Being called a cracked egg isn't much of an insult where I'm from, but I can understand why it might be.
I understood you that time. I'm sorry I became angry. My language is as difficult to you as yours would be to me. The nice thing is that all translators are connected. Eventually, all who have one will be able to understand you. Now, I would like to refer to you as something other than the alien. How are you called differently?
Called differently? Oh, you're asking me my name.
Name? He thought for a moment. I think so.
My name is Mira Rodriguez, but just Mira is fine.
Your called differently seems long. I am called differently. Hiss, hiss, click.
That did not translate, and now I'm afraid to try it.
Sisveta tasted the air.
You do not smell afraid.
I mean that I worry I will say it wrong and offend you again.
Your species fear causing offense.
Sort of. My world had many different languages. It is very easy to have certain sounds come together and have them mean something in another language when they may mean nothing in your own. Even gestures mean different things in different cultures.
What are gestures?
He said the word gestures, strangely proving that the translator only had basic understanding and was still learning the new language.
You made the high gesture to my exterior camera.
She demonstrated.
That does not mean hi. I was indicating I was the one in charge.
That is a nonverbal way to say hello anywhere on my planet.
Sisveta dropped his jaw and held up his tongue. He then closed his mouth.
That is the nonverbal way to say hello anywhere on my planet.
Mira tried it.
Your mouth muscle does not look like it has much flexibility.
Mira chuckled.
I don't think we use ours for as many things as you probably do.
The door to the flight deck opened again, and one of the aliens from before entered and handed Sisveta a belt.
Stand. Click hiss.
What is click hiss?
You're called different. Was it not right?
It didn't translate.
We will get it figured out. For now, put on this belt. It will feel uncomfortable for a few minutes as it adjusts to your species' needs for breath and comfort. Then I can take you to the scanners. It will help us to better understand your various needs.
Mira started to become scared. Sisveta scented her fear.
Why have you become fearful? Have I said something wrong?
Why are you being nice to me?
Nice?
Sisveta was confused. This was standard procedure for encountering a new sentient species. This alien was his first to set up. Had he done something wrong? He started going through procedures in his mind. He was certain he had done things correctly.
If something is too good to be true, then it probably is.
You think I have ill intentions?
I don't know what your intentions are.
My intentions are to ensure you will be safe on my ship, that we can provide correct nourishment, learn about you and your people, and potentially introduce you to the Federation while ensuring your craft and you were not picked up by hiss, who would sell you to the highest bidder.
What are hiss?
Close, but I understood what you were trying to say. It did not translate. The lowest of belly crawlers?
Scum?
Perhaps. However, I don't think that word is enough. Will you come with me now?
He held out the belt to her. She took it and put it in place, and then he helped her to secure it.
This will feel uncomfortable while it adjusts to your needs. I will help you stay steady.
She nodded, and he set the control. He was right in that it was uncomfortable. At one point, the pressure was so high she nearly fainted, and then went the other way, and became so light she couldn't breathe. Sisveta kept her calm. Once the pressure was stabilized, Mira felt a prick at her waist.
Ow!
I apologize. I forgot to tell you. The belt has to analyze your life fluid's oxygen levels. It will take a few more readings that go to our medical staff. We will be going there first after the belt adjusts your sphere to your needs.
After a few more minutes, the belt flashed a small purple light.
All right. It will be safe for you to leave your ship now.
He turned to the door and walked several paces, and when he did not hear the alien following, he turned.
Are you unable to walk?
No, sorry. It was just sudden. I'm coming.
He looked into each of the rooms as he headed towards the exit. He finally came upon the kitchen.
I need you to grab a variety of food items. We will need to scan them to ensure we can get you proper nutrition.
Mira grabbed several different food bags. Even though this ship kept its own gravity, NASA still only provided the thick food pastes. She also grabbed a water bag.
Your food is all liquid?
Mira quickly explained how prior to building ships like this, they did not have gravity on spaceships, so couldn't risk food to get caught in the vent system.
That's a rather interesting solution, he replied as they continued to exit the ship.
Sisveta led the alien to the medical bay. It gasped as it saw the chief medical officer, Clarud.
Greetings and warm rocks to you, Captain Sisveta. Is this the alien that has caused so much activity today?
Sisveta?
Mira asked.
Is that how you say your name?
Ah, you understood it. It makes sense. Clarud's language has sounds that more resemble your language than mine. Try telling him you're called differently. All of his language has long been translated.
Mira nodded and turned to this new alien. He was very strange-looking. He resembled an alligator if they had human-length arms and legs. His snout was much shorter and his skin was orange. Instead of the spin ridge of an alligator, he had a short purple mohawk that went all the way down his tail.
My name is Mira Rodriguez, but you can call me Mira. Mira Rodriguez, or Mira for familiarity. It is pleasant to meet you.
Mira looked over at Sisveta, who was grinning.
It is also pleasant to meet you, Mira Rodriguez. I must return to the controls. I will return a little later. Our chief medical officer will have many questions for you so that we can learn about you.
He left, and the medical bay door closed behind him. Clarud ran many scans on Mira, as well as her food, and asked many questions, some of which were embarrassing. However, he also offered the same kind of information about himself and Sisveta. They spoke of her understanding of science, and he filled in some gaps. He asked her where her planet was and showed her where they had picked her up from.
That one there.
She pointed out when he had found her solar system.
We call it Earth.
Are you sure?
He was looking at Mira dubiously.
Of course.
She zoomed in on the land masses.
This is the country I'm from. It's called the United States of America, or USA for short.
That's a Class Black planet. The temperatures change too frequently, and most of what grows there is poisonous.
Poisonous? What exactly is poisonous to you?
Here, I have pictures.
He showed her pictures of grass trees and flowers.
Sure, some of those are poisonous to me too, but only if I tried to eat it.
She moved over to a picture of foxglove.
This is both medicine and poison. If I had a heart problem, a medicine that comes from this plant would keep me alive. But to eat even a small amount of this plant would kill me too.
I'm not speaking of eating. I am speaking of touching. To break a stem of any of these and have it touch my skin, I would get itch bumps, and if I continue, my lungs would cease functioning.
It kind of sounds like an extreme allergy. I get that way with cats, but not to that extreme. At least not for a long time. I usually start with sneezing first.
After scanning her food and water, he let her know that her food was poisonous to the crew, but the water was good for the most part. Small amounts would be okay, but there were trace amounts of plant material in it which would become lethal over time.
I'm sorry, Mira, but we cannot replicate your food. However, from the scans I have taken of you, it appears that you should have little problem with our food or hydration liquids. It is very strange how resilient your species is, but you don't appear to have any defensive evolutions. For example, skeeks like Sisveta have a venomous bite. They do not have teeth or fangs, but their mouth ridge is sharp all the way to the back of their mouths. My species, Juten, can stiffen and shoot our fur ridge at will. But you humans have no claws, no venom. Your physical strength is on the lower end of the scale. However, your endurance is among the highest, if not the highest of all species. How is this possible?
During the course of their conversation, she had learned that while most species were herbivores in nature, there were carnivores, and even a few omnivores. The fact that humans ate meat was not a terrifying concept for Clarud. In fact, his species was completely carnivorous. This was a relief because talking about predation tactics as she was about to do wouldn't alienate these new species from her. His species and all of the other meat-eating species they had encountered so far used ambush and trap predation in their ancestral pasts and had since moved to herds and even more recently to replication so that they no longer had to kill to eat.
Do you understand the term pursuit predator?
Mira asked.
I understand those separately. Please explain how you mean them.
Early in human history, we were nomads that rarely settled and planted crops. Typically, societies were hunters and gatherers. So, as a herd of animals migrated from colder temperatures to warmer ones, our ancient ancestors followed them. Many of those animals were much stronger and bigger than us, so we would pursue, wait until they settled for the night, and cause them to exhaust themselves before engaging them. This is called pursuit predation. We may not be faster, but we can run off of less nutrients and sleep than many other stronger animals on Earth.
Clarud nodded in understanding.
We also learned how to make tools and weapons early on.
That makes sense. There are other species that have your nutritional needs, and they also are in your range of stamina. However, they are much stronger and taller than you. Your people are an anomaly, Mira.
He paused and took a breath so he could change the subject.
Now that I understand where you are from, and you have told me of your mission, where is this Alpha Centauri at? We may be able to give you better information than you would be able to collect on that ancient-style craft.
She showed him on the star map.
You must not go there.
Why, Clarud? What's wrong with that star system?
The species that live there are slavers, Mira. And what they feel they cannot sell, they eat. I am very sorry your crew is dead, but I am also glad it happened so that your ship put out its distress signal, and we could come upon you and your ship.
Mira was confused because they did not send out a distress signal.
What is strange is that your planet is not too far from them. How is it that the Imperia has not discovered your people?
Two things. First, we didn't put out a distress signal.
Clarud interrupted.
All ships do when life support is compromised. Your people were copying what they saw when they built your ship. They may not have realized that the thing they copied had such a purpose. What is your other thing?
The knowledge that they may have copied tech without understanding other uses made Mira sit down heavily. She was worried as she whispered,
What if they did know?
Clarud was worried at the sudden change in Mira's disposition.
What do you mean?
Can you show me what they look like first?
Clarud nodded and brought up images of them. Mira gasped.
Greys.
Have you seen them before?
No, but my ship, as you know, was designed based on old alien wrecks, and there are stories of alien abductions and experimentations. Other people just think they're crazy or drunk too much. They aren't believed. But people have drawn images of what the aliens that abducted them looked like, and many look just like that.
Mira was beginning to panic, so Clarud had her lie down while he called Esesveta to come back. Sesveta had watched the interactions he had with Mira that he had recorded. He had been surprised that Mira had not told her superior of himself or his ship. He wondered why. First contact tends to be a joyous thing for new species, to know you are not alone. But Mira had not acted like that. She was more afraid at first. He had turned the ship to head back towards Federation space and was still contemplating the recording when Clarud messaged him that he was needed back at medical. Sesveta entered the medical bay and sampled the air. Mira was distressed and Clarud was concerned and anxious.
What worries you, Clarud?
It is Mira, Captain. She was headed to Imperia territory. She said it was their closest star system neighbor. Even worse is when I showed her images of Imperians. She recognized them.
Show her images of Vasily and Lakshi.
Sesveta suggested.
Mira, come and look at these images. Do any look familiar?
He held out his hand to her, and she took it. He guided her back to the main viewing screen. Mira pointed to the Vasily.
I think I've seen drawings of this one. People call them lizard men, or even reptilians. I don't recognize the other one at all.
This is troubling,
Sesveta replied.
These three races work together in the slave trade. There are three main groups that races belong to politically. The Galactic Federation, which we belong to, believes in peace, unity, and moving everyone towards a galaxy where everyone can be healthy, fed, and educated. The neutrals believe more in a "my needs are more important than yours" mentality. They are not evil, but do not renounce evil things such as slavery. In fact, they have many that enjoy having slaves. This is more individuals than full species that do this. They do not go out and make races slaves, and even have enslaved their own people in some cases, but they do turn blind eyes to the act. Do you understand?
Yes. My own people went through having and then later outlawing slavery.
Knowing it was outlawed is good to know. It means that perhaps your people would be more likely to join us. The last group only has these three races. They are extremely violent and feed the darker impulses of the neutrals.
I don't know, Sesveta.
Captain,
Clarud interrupted.
He is our captain, and should be addressed as such,"
he explained gently.
"It is fine for now, Chief Medical Officer, Clarud. We are alone, and this alien has had many shocks this day. We can be informal in such privacy. You yourself have only called her Mira. Have you even asked her rank upon her ship?"
Sizveta chided. Sizveta tasted Clarud's embarrassment, so turned back to Mira.
"Continue."
Mira rubbed her face and finally crossed one arm, rested her opposite elbow on it, and held her face, covering her eyes with that hand. Her emotions tasted strange that she had so many at once. Fear, resignation, trepidation, hopelessness, stressed. There were more, but he couldn't separate them. She finally spoke.
Humans have a lot of darker impulses.
She whispered.
What if they have helped to push those? What if some of the things we've done to each other was because of them? We have a lot of empathy. We really do. We care about things we probably shouldn't, but we can't help it. It's how we are wired. But we have so much capacity for harm.
It was like watching a puppet with its strings cut, as Mira dropped down, as though all the energy to hold her standing had left her. Clarud and Sizveta shared a glance of worry before Clarud lifted the smaller Mira and set her back onto a medical bed. He moved away, and Sizveta pulled up a chair so he could look at Mira at a more even level instead of looking down upon her.
"I have notified the Galactic Federation Council of you, and they wish to meet you. Hopefully, they will help come to a decision on what to do with your planet. As you may have guessed, either your people know about the aliens on their planet and have agreements with them, or they do not. You know your government leaders best. What do you think?"
Mira was about to answer when Sizveta noticed how different she looked from when he dropped her off.
"Wait,"
he said to her, and then turned his attention to Clarud.
"Do we know her nutrition and sleep needs?"
"Yes. She is an omnivore who needs 2 to 5 meals a day, which is determined by how much is eaten at the meal and 8 hours of sleep in a day cycle."
"How long is her day cycle?"
"We determined that our hour cycle and her hour cycle are similar enough to—"
"Clarud, that isn't what I asked. How long is her day cycle?"
24 hours, Captain. Why?"
"Because she looks like a skeetling that is refusing to attend to its sleep cycle."
He focused back on Mira.
"How long has it been since you last attended to your sleep cycle?"
Her eyes were still mostly white when he had first seen her, but now they were mostly red. Her eyelids were drooping, and her body seemed to have a heaviness to it with her movements that weren't there before. Mira's thoughts were becoming increasingly sluggish, and even this simple math took her far too long to figure out, so she had to do it out loud.
We each had an air tank with 1 spare, so 6 tanks. They each held 3 hours of air. Fixing the life support systems left me with about an hour left, so that was 14 hours. Then I had to refill them. That was a lot quicker. 2 hours, I think? And then I was fixing the thruster when you picked me up. I think that was a little less than an hour."
Sizveta was shocked.
"I left you here 3 hours ago. You have been awake for at least 17 hours before you arrived here. Have you eaten anything?"
Mira shook her head.
"And Clarud, I see you ran an endurance test, a speed test, and a full skeletal strain test. Have you even allowed her to rest?"
Clarud was very embarrassed as he replied that he hadn't. The human had been nearly non-stop active for 17 hours and then endured another 3 hours of testing. While that was not a full day for her 24-hour day, it was nearly a full galactic day, which was 20 hours. Most species were awake for 10 hours and asleep for 10 hours. And then he had another realization. This exhausted human had scored so high in the endurance testing, but was still not the highest. While exhausted. He shuddered at what a well-rested human might be able to do. While Clarud was lost in his thoughts, Sizveta was speaking to Mira.
"You have my apologies, Mira. We should have ensured you had rest and nourishment. Do you think you can eat or drink anything?"
Mira replied in the negative.
"Do you think you can walk a little way so I can get you settled in your room?"
Sisveta helped her up and shot Clarud a glare.
We will speak of this later.
Clarud knew he had messed up. He had assumed the new alien would say something. Mira was walking much slower now, but Sisveta understood. Just like he was talking to a tired skeetling that had to be guided to their nest, he kept up a litany of, just a little longer, and we're almost there. Once he got her into the room, he had her press her belt against the wall so that the room would now be set to her own atmospheric needs, which he briefly explained, so he could take the belt off of her and set it next to the door. He guided her to the nest, which was circular in shape, with a raised padded edge all the way around. The interior would be soft and plush.
Is there anything you need removing for comfort?
She struggled to remove her foot coverings, so he helped her to do so. Once they were off, she instinctively climbed into the nest and was soon breathing deeply. He left the room and strode back to the medical bay to have that talk with the chief medical officer. Mira woke up with a start. Where was she? What was she laying on? What woke her up? Was it a noise? As she began to move, the lights slowly increased. She was still breathing quickly with alarm as she took in her surroundings.
Hello? Mira, are you awake yet?
Mira realized that was what had awakened her. She had heard the door open. It was Clarud that was calling out to her.
Sorta?
She called back. She climbed out of the strange-looking but oddly comfortable bed. She knew her hair was probably everywhere, but she was still groggy enough to not care. The bed was separated from a small living area, so as she moved past the partition between the spaces, she saw Clarud standing near the open doorway with a cart of food.
May I come in?
But you're already in?
Mira replied, confused. Clarud took a small step forward and put his hand up. It connected to a field of some kind that prevented him from moving further.
You must have different customs. These rooms are all made so you cannot hear any commotion going on in the halls. So if you want to visit with someone, you open the door and can enter a small area just inside the doorway. Then you ask permission to enter further. It must be given each time. Sisveta set you as the owner of this room, so you are the one who can allow another to enter. If you allow me to enter, you must say, yes, you can enter.
He explained.
Yes, you can enter.
He grabbed the cart he had brought with him and directed it into the room. The cart was similar to any food trolley you might see back on Earth, except the cart did not have wheels. It hovered at a height that was comfortable to Clarud to push but wouldn't be for Mira to push. He brought the cart over to a small table that was set low to the ground. As Mira studied it, it was set up similarly to the traditional Japanese tables. Instead of cushions spread around the table, there was a place you could sit that had a different look, almost similar to the material of the bed, that encircled the table, and there was space beneath the table for you to put your legs. Mira soon learned that the table could be raised or lowered with a few buttons so that it was at a species' own comfort. In fact, it could even have different levels if different species were sitting at the same table. Clarud brought the cart close to the table and then lowered it so he could take dishes off of it as needed instead of filling the table with food and hydration.
I must apologize to you. I did not realize how long it had been since your last sleep cycle, and I should have asked. It is part of a new species protocol to ask about needs, and in my excitement, I forgot to ask and ensure your needs were being met. There has not been a new first contact within my life cycle, and I let my excitement get in the way of decency. I will do better. He looked down and then back to the food. In that spirit, I would like to introduce you to some food that is offered on board. I didn't know what kind of eating aids your species might use, so I brought some of each we have on board.
Some of the utensils were very strange looking, and she wondered at how they might be used. She did see something that looked similar to a spoon as well as what looked similar to chopsticks, and so chose those.
Interesting. Those are the eating aids of the trick. You haven't met them yet, but they are a nocturnal species, and the only other species we have on board.
At Mira's confused and anxious body language, he replied,
All will be well. We will meet your nutritional needs, and then I will show you the features of your room. Our computers are still analyzing your life fluid so that we can make vaccines for us all. We want to ensure we do not catch anything you may be carrying, and we do not want you to catch anything we may be carrying. It was a bad first contacts before that became protocol. To those ends, I must ask you to stay in your room until tomorrow. We will vaccinate the crew first, and then I will come and vaccinate you. After a few hours, I will be able to give you a tour of the ship.
He could tell she had many questions.
Eat first. Worry about the rest after. Yes?
Once she had agreed, he began showing her various foods, told her if they were meant for herbivores or carnivores. She was the only omnivore on the ship, and let her try them. He had already been able to run scans on anything that would cause her harm, so he knew that she would be able to digest any of these foods without issues. After they ate their fill, he showed her the bathroom and how everything worked, and then to the panel for the computer system in the room. He showed her how to contact him and how to have the computer read text so that she could understand it. Her clearance would be basic, so there was no worry that she would get into a part of the computer she shouldn't.
Do you have any questions for me before I go back to medical?
Yeah, something has been nagging me. Why could I understand Captain Esesveta before he could understand me?
Clarud considered how to answer. This was not a classified subject. Even children knew how it worked, but he had to ensure he was answering in line with her understanding of science, as well as in a way to not cause unnecessary fear.
You mentioned that there are many languages on your homeworld. Yes?
Mira nodded.
Are there people that can speak many languages?
Some people even make that their profession so that they can translate for people.
Do you have languages that had a common ancestor, but have developed to be different languages?
Yes, there are several language families like that.
Mira replied.
Do you think that if a person who already knew many languages would have an easier or a more difficult time learning another?
Definitely easier. I had a friend in high school that picked up new languages very quickly.
The translator we use is similar. The programming has learned thousands upon thousands of languages. That is why it can understand a new language so quickly. The other half of it is where it is placed. It is able to connect with our brains and learns quickly how to communicate. The translator already understood what the captain said. In the beginning, the language is clunky and more formal. Sometimes the words are almost correct. So, when the captain spoke to you, you thought you were hearing words in your language. Instead, you were hearing a basic semblance of emotions and intentions that were turned into words. As we have spoken together, the languages we hear from each other become smoother. This is like a computer program that has learned what you mean when you create shortcuts and can therefore do similar things before you realize you wanted to do them. The program is not intelligence. It cannot think on its own. It can, however, learn and adapt to our needs quickly. You can also easily correct it when it adapts incorrectly. I feel like I'm over-explaining this. I don't want you to fear it. It cannot make you do anything, nor is it able to listen to your thoughts. I hear that was a bad first contact. The species understood the explanations to believe their own thoughts were not safe. We do not have such a technology. It would be unethical.
He shivered at that last thought.
Please tell me I have not made further mistakes and caused unnecessary fear or harm.
Mira chuckled.
We also have program interfaces that become more user-friendly as you use them.
Clarud visibly relaxed.
Is there anything else?
When she replied in the negative, he replied,
I must leave then. I'll let the captain know you are awake. I know he had more questions for you. One of us will be by later for the next meal. Contact me if you have any needs.
Once Clarud had left, Mira headed over to the bathroom and took a much-needed shower. It was a very strange experience, and at one point she thought she may have changed the setting to D-shed, but she was clean. She looked around for a brush but couldn't find one. She finger-combed her hair the best she could, but it was long and thick. She worried about snarls turning into mats, but she should be good for a little longer. She didn't like having to put her dirty clothing back on, but it was all she had in this room. She mentally kicked herself for not grabbing at least a change of clothing when she had the chance. Clarude had shown her how to use the computer, so she began to explore it. She found a ship map and felt like she was back in college on the first day and trying to find the correct building and classroom all over again. He had set the system to New Species, so anytime she pressed a button, it would read what it was for, and then she would have to tap it again to open the file. It was time-consuming, but she appreciated that someone had thought of it. He had also shown her how she could ask the computer to find something or give a command. She was getting tired of feeling like a kid at a whiteboard solving basic equations, which made her inwardly groan about her math error last night. She pressed the appropriate button, which made a tone.
Is there a way to use you from a distance?
There was a tone in a different part of the room, and when she turned her head towards it, saw a slow pulsing of light at that corner of the room. Once she got closer, it was what the aliens had referred to as a portable.
Thank you.
She called out absent-mindedly. Once she picked it up, it activated, showing the same screen as the one on the wall. The portable reminded her of a tablet in some regards, and a chunk of plexiglass in others. When it was powered on, you couldn't see through it, but when it had been lying down, it practically blended into the table it had been resting on. A few hours later, found Mira happily looking through the available information on the portable, and even adding in some written language, so that she didn't have to have the computer read to her constantly, when the door to the room opened. Sisveta was in the entryway with another cart of food. Mira smiled, and before he could say anything, she said,
Good afternoon, Captain Sisveta. You may come in.
You are learning quickly, I see. It is a meal break for me, and I thought it was a good opportunity to continue our conversation from last night and to also ensure that you received nourishment. I hope you do not mind, but I have only brought non-meats. The Juten are the only carnivores on board, and it is difficult for me to be around their food if I don't need to be.
That's absolutely fine.
She moved over to the table and set part of the table to a height similar to what Clarude used, so that it wouldn't be difficult for him to sit. Clarude had had to raise his side before sitting down last time. They sat down, and he explained the dishes briefly.
Before we start, I just want to say that I really can do basic math. I'm so embarrassed.
You were exhausted. It would have been rude of me to point it out while you were in such a state. 23 hours is a long time to be awake and aware. Is that a normal amount of time a human can be awake?
Sort of. It's usually not by choice. The longer we are awake like that, the harder it is to do things, as you saw.
How long can humans stay awake for? Skeets will be unconscious after 17 hours whether we like it or not.
Adrenaline won't keep you awake?
The first word did not translate. What is it?
It's a chemical one of our glands will secrete when we are in a state of stress, high excitement, or if there is a threat to survival. It makes your heart beat faster, clear your sinuses, and can even allow you to run faster or lift heavier than your normal ability for a short time. If it gets triggered but you don't end up needing the boost, it still gives your heart a faster beat and makes your hands shake.
I do not believe we have that chemical. Can I have you say the word into my portable, and I will see if the Juten have a similar word?
She did so.
So how long can your people force themselves to be awake?
I don't remember what the record was exactly. I remember it was something crazy like over a week.
At Sisveta's confused look, she said,
Our week is 7 days.
His eyes widened.
I think the longest I went was about 2.5 days due to insomnia.
And then she had to explain what insomnia was. He was shocked that a species' own body could force them to stay up for so long against their will. After they ate, Sisveta asked about what she remembered of their conversation prior, and then if she had thought about it. Mira collected her thoughts. She, of course, thought of how much she should reveal to aliens, but her instincts were telling her that they could be trusted. She did have a few questions, and had even written them down with the help of the portable.
You have concerns. I can see them on your face and scent them in the air. Ask.
Mira let out a heavy sigh. He was right. She was concerned.
We have people that point giant listening devices at star systems. We are able to pick up the sounds that stars make, and even some planets. We have broadcasted all kinds of signals into space. Why haven't we encountered each other before now?
It's a good question, and I can think of a few possibilities. It could even be more than one thing happening together. I'm not sure. One of the possibilities I have thought of is that you recognized both the Imperia and the Vasili. If they had started to come to your planet before your people started broadcasting and listening, they would have the means to intercept those transmissions and give only what they wanted you to know. It is the same for any of our transmissions that might have made it out to your planet. They could have intercepted them and obscured the sounds until it only sounded like a static. The other possibility that I thought of was that our systems of communication may not be compatible with each other. Your ship style was ancient to me, but the communication system you were using was very foreign to me. That could simply be because it is something we have not used for a long time, and I do not have an interest in outdated technologies, or it is something we have never used. It could easily fall into either of those categories.
How would they be able to destroy incoming and outgoing communications like that?
That would be very easy, I'm afraid. In fact, it causes strange lighting in the sky under certain conditions.
Strange lighting?
Yes. The particles it puts out interact with the light from your sun and would create great sheets of light in the sky.
Mira's eyes grew larger than he had seen before.
You have seen this effect?
Mira nodded dejectedly.
We call it the aurora borealis.
They both sat in silence for a while, lost in their own thoughts.
To answer your question from last night, I could see it going either way. Earth governments control knowledge they think could cause fear. They knew they had an alien spacecraft that had crash-landed over 100 years ago, but they denied its existence until they had understood everything they could about it and could mostly replicate it. By the time the government released any information, they spoke in certainties.
They wish to appear confident. I think that is pretty common amongst all species,
Sisveta added. Mira nodded and continued.
On the other hand, people have claimed to see these aliens, and instead of being taken seriously, they were ostracized, made fun of, and were treated like the town drunk. So, I really don't know.
Mira smelled stressed.
It's all right. We will help you to figure it out. We will arrive at the Federation meeting site the day after tomorrow. There are many wise thinkers that can help us to handle the situation in the best way possible. Did you have other questions for me?
Why would the Imperia and Vasili do this? What is the purpose? I mean, they haven't enslaved the population, and the general population doesn't even know they are there.
I've thought of a few possibilities for that too. I hesitate to voice them because I do not want to cause you unnecessary fear.
Say them. I'm probably already thinking about them, and it would be nice to know that I'm not working myself into a panic over nothing.
Clarud has been keeping me informed on his progress with a vaccine. He has found your species to be very hearty. I think that is the right word. You are well adapted to fighting off most diseases you might get from us. We are having a harder time being able to say the same. To this end, they may be looking for a way to infect your people with a way to reduce your empathy. This is something their people would find a weakness, and it's possible that they are looking to add humans to bolster their numbers, to have you to become like them.
I don't think they will succeed in that.
Why are you so certain about that?
Humans can bond with just about anything, even the inanimate. For example, it didn't seem odd to me to thank the computer for showing me where the portable was. And I have absolutely apologized to my car for going over a bad pothole in the road.
Sisveta let out a loud hiss, but the translator quickly translated it to laughter.
How very strange. Yes, I think they would have that problem as well. It is good to hear that they will fail, if that is their intent.
You said a few possibilities. That was one. What were the others?
Sisveta took a deep breath to calm himself.
If they are not looking for an alliance, then I fear they would be seeing if humanity would make better slaves or better meat.
I think our fears have the same lines of thought.
Do not fret. Clarud believes the vaccine will be ready tomorrow, and the Federation will be able to offer answers and hope. Today is not a time for worries. From what you have said, the Imperia and Vasily have had a long time on your planet. A few days will not change things.
Mira met his gaze.
Unless my crew and I were to be their first test subjects on slavery or meat.
Sisveta hadn't taken his thoughts that far.
Let us hope that it was not the case. It makes sense for your first out-of-system flight to be to the closest star system. It is a natural place to head to. It is just unfortunate that the Imperia homeworld is in that star system. Will you be well?
Mira nodded.
Try not to dwell on it. I know it will be difficult. But if any of that is the case, you are still heading in the best direction it is possible to go.
I know. Here, let me help you get everything together.
He let her help him set everything back on the cart before heading back out of her room. It was a few hours later when a strange tone sounded on the portable that Mira was still working with. It was the only thing in the room, and if she was going to be speaking to a bunch of other species in 2 days, she wanted them to understand her. After a few more moments, the tone stopped, and the screen switched to Clarud.
You have fine-looking air holes, Mira.
Clarud chuckled.
If you like, you can set the portable back on the stand, and this screen will shift to the main one for the room.
Mira colored briefly. They had spoken enough that she knew he could have a more playful personality. She held the portable out at arm's length instead.
Better?
Clarud made a chuffing sound, which the translator turned into a soft chuckle.
I wanted to ask, instead of coming piled with food, the 3 species on board the ship tend to only eat 2 larger meals, and you mentioned that yours eats between 2 and 5 meals, depending on the amount of food. We never determined how large is large or how small is small. In a short time, the day crew will be resting, and the truck will be taking over. I know you are not used to our shorter day, so I wanted to see if you were hungry, if we were inadvertently starving you, or if you would like for me to arrange for one of our trick crewmates to bring you a meal later on.
No, the 2 larger meals are fine, and Captain Sisveta left me some water, or as you call it, hydration fluid. I will be perfectly all right until morning.
If that changes for any reason, use the voice activation and tell it to contact the medical bay. There is always someone here that can answer you.
Thank you. I probably will be heading to bed in a few hours anyway. It was a pretty eventful and tiring day yesterday, after all.
She smiled.
Yes, I suppose it was.
He made a strange wave with his neck and head, and then the communication ended.
Was that a nonverbal goodbye?
She asked herself aloud. It was a habit she developed a long time ago to either talk to the inanimate or to talk to herself out loud. She had gotten good at keeping it to a minimum while she was around the crew, but being fairly isolated in this room had her back to doing it. She settled back into the seat she was using and continued to add more English to the translator. It would say a word that would get translated into English, and then she would repeat it for the translator. Sometimes, the word it wanted wouldn't translate for her, and she would have to notify the translator. When that happened, it would cycle through a few languages to see if the language used was the issue or not. This happened a few times, and once, the program had to give the definition of a word in order to find the English equivalent. The next morning, Clarud came by with breakfast.
You look like a Juten juvenile whose spines have not stiffened yet, so they are just everywhere. How has the nest been working for you? Sisveta said that your nests were shaped much differently on your ship.
I've been 2 days without a brush. I think I'm doing rather well with my hair, considering. As to the nest, that should just be the galactic standard everywhere. Best sleep I've ever gotten.
She explained briefly how human beds were shaped and what they were made out of to her knowledge.
That doesn't sound comfortable at all. How can you snuggle and care for your young properly if you must worry they will fall out?
Mira chuckled.
We use a special bed for our young called a crib. When they outgrow it, they move to a smaller version of a bed, and then later a normal-sized bed.
That sounds wasteful.
Most of the time, the cribs can convert to the small bed, and if it's still in good condition, it can get passed to a friend or family member.
That is less wasteful.
They chatted as they ate.
The vaccines are already being given to the crew, and I have your vaccine here.
He pulled out a tablet.
You must let this dissolve under your tongue. I have brought mine with me as well. I must warn you they do not taste very good, so I have brought hydration fluid for us both.
Mira took her tablet in hand.
Haven't you and the captain already been carrying anything I have to the rest of the crew and vice versa?
Yes and no. The belts we wear to maintain our own atmospheric conditions help to remove most of the contagions we may accidentally give to each other. We also have air purifiers that clean the air as well. While it is less likely for us to give each other our diseases, it is still possible. So, we kept you contained, and no one was allowed to share mine or the captain's spheres. Are you ready? It will dissolve quickly, so be ready with the hydration fluid.
They both put the tablets under their tongues, made faces at each other until they dissolved, and then drank water until the taste finally disappeared.
That was disgusting, Clarud.
Clarud was shuddering still, and his spines that made up the mohawk shook from his head all the way down to his tail.
I don't know if I should be glad that is not a common occurrence, or sad that I have not gotten used to it by now.
Why haven't you just added a flavor to it?
We can't. We have tried, and we can't. Both real and artificial flavorings cause vaccines to decay and fail.
He gave one last shake and took a steadying breath.
Protocol is to give the vaccine 2 hours, and then we can get you to your ship. I am sure you would like clean clothing and this brush you speak of, and then we can take that tour.
It really only takes 2 hours to be fully vaccinated?
What are you used to?
2 to 4 weeks.
That seems excessive. I'll be back in 2 hours.
2 hours later saw Clarud walking Mira back to her ship. He boarded with her and was fascinated to look at all the strange human things. Mira packed a bag with her clothing and then started to run her brush through her hair.
How strange,
he remarked. Mira chuckled.
Don't you have any species with long hair?
Of course. They just have never groomed it in my presence. It seems a more private thing.
Mira chuckled again, a little louder.
If this is a perverse thing to you, maybe you should turn around or something.
Is it not to your species?
No. In fact, we wear our hair in a lot of different ways. Some are intricate, and so people will make videos showing others how to do the same with their hair.
She worked her hair into a tight bun at the back of her head.
There. Now it won't get in my way.
When she turned back to Clarud, she saw that he had, in fact, turned away. It seemed it was considered fine to have your hair showing, but to groom it in front of another might be considered wrong. That was going to be a weird conversation later. Though perhaps to a species that did not need to care for its weird mohawk thing, grooming in front of another might be considered provocative. Or maybe they were just prudes. She didn't know enough about alien culture to make that determination. After a pit stop at her room to change, Clarud showed her where everything was and explained some features, such as how to tell that a wall had a screen to use if she became lost or needed to talk to someone, and how to activate it. Clarud was explaining about the lights.
This light is fine for our species, but the Treek are nocturnal, as has been mentioned before. Even light this bright would cause them harm. So, if you are walking in a hall and it suddenly becomes dim, it is not a malfunction. It means that a Treek has opened a doorway into the hall, and the ship is accommodating them. If it happens when you are walking, stop, let your eyes adjust, and then continue.
Makes sense.
Unless you are up late, you probably won't see them. Are you ready for another meal?
Yeah, I could eat.
They headed to the dining hall, and it was like in a dream where you go to school, and you enter the building only for everyone to stop what they are doing and stare at you completely silent. It was unnerving. Clarud made some kind of annoyed gesture, and suddenly they were all moving again and talking.
Clarud, that was downright creepy.
They are only curious. They have never seen one of your kind before, and as I said, there has not been a new alien species in a very long time. They will be curious about what foods you choose, what eating aids you will use, what kind of teeth you have, and even the sound of your language will be interesting to them. It's okay to be overwhelmed. We can take food back to your room if you like.
No, it's okay. It was bound to happen sooner or later, right?
Clarud agreed and showed her through the food line, pointing out things she had tried before that she liked as well as foods that her species would not be capable of eating. There was a lot of murmuring when she also added carnivore foods to her tray. At Mira's tense posture at the new mutterings, he reminded her that omnivores were rare. They sat down across from each other, but next to a pair of skeets. Clarud reached over and pressed a few buttons on either side of Mira, and then did it for himself. Opaque, but not solid partitions went up on either side of both of them. They only went up about 1.5 feet and stopped. Mira could pick up a faint buzzing coming from them.
What are those?
She asked, startled.
Their official name is comfort partitions, but we usually refer to them as friendship screens. Skeets, like our table mates, are often discomforted by the meals of Juten, so that friends of different diets can still eat with one another. These screens were created. They block out not only the sight of the food, but there is a feature that causes a humming, you might be able to hear, which stops the smells from spreading over. There is a third screen that can be put up between us, but I don't think that will be necessary.
Mira looked around and noticed all of the areas where the screens were, and that they were not as random as she had thought. They were all where different species were sitting together.
That's a really thoughtful invention.
Yes, I understand that in the beginning of the Federation, ships were either herbivore or carnivore, and on the occasions where they had to be mixed, there were separate dining halls.
Mira felt a strange prickling sensation at the back of her neck. She whipped her head around, and the species at the other table that had been staring at her quickly looked away. Clarud looked up at the movement.
How did you know they were looking at you?
It was a weird prickling sensation that made me feel like I was being watched. Don't you have that kind of sense?
Clarud was taken aback. No one had ever reported having such a sense.
No. Do all humans possess this?
Yes. Maybe not all to the same degree, but there is a weird sensation that happens when we feel we are being watched.
She pointed over to a different direction that was still behind her.
Are they staring?
Clarud was now even more fascinated.
Yes.
Mira was obviously uncomfortable. She gave a small shudder and then bowed her head over her plate as she tried to ignore the stares she knew were directed at her. Clarud looked at the group doing the staring and bristled his spine ridges in a warning. They caught it and quickly looked away. Mira's shoulders relaxed as soon as the stares stopped.
What did you do?
She asked.
That was a Juten warning of a potential attack. We don't tend to have to make good on such a threat, but it was enough to remind them that they were being rude and to find their manners quickly, or that I would be forced to find them for them.
It was as they were heading back to her room that she realized that it was only the skeeks that had been staring and not the Juten. She asked Clarud about it.
My people are among the first that became spacefaring. Not the first, just among them. We host many intergalactic schools, and so Juten are exposed to many different races, much younger than other species. It doesn't mean that my people weren't just as curious about you. It just means that we're better at hiding, that we are also analyzing you. It might also be eye position. We wouldn't have had to turn our heads so much to see you.
I suppose that makes sense.
They were now in her room.
Thank you for the tour.
It was my pleasure. I'll let Captain S. Sveta know we have finished the tour, and he will be by to let you know what to expect for tomorrow with the Federation Council.
A few hours after settling back into her room, Sveta entered, and Mira let him in.
How are you holding up? I hear that the mealtime you had in the dining hall was difficult.
It felt like being the new kid at a new school all over again, except that you are wearing the wrong style of clothes or have worn your hair in a style that is out of fashion for the new school.
I understood most of that, but I think I understand what you meant.
He had sat opposite her in the small sitting area of the room.
Let's speak of tomorrow and what to expect.
He went over the way the room would be laid out, how many species to expect, the name of the current leader of the council, the names of the more prominent members of the council as well as images of them, and what kinds of questions they would ask her, so that she could be prepared on whether or not she felt she could or should answer those questions. He also explained that being the leader of the council did not grant this person more power. It only gave them the right to set topics of discussion, decide to adjourn a meeting early, or to contain discussion if members were getting off topic. This was a position that was passed to another every 5 years and was done in a rotation that allowed for all species to get a turn at leading.
Do you have any questions for me?
He asked when he was finished.
I do, but not about the meeting. My commanding officer is going to respond soon, and they will know how long it takes to acknowledge a message. When Clerud took me to my ship, I was able to tell that no messages had come in yet, but if I'm away from my ship, how will I know a message has come in?
The meeting will not be until tomorrow evening to accommodate our Nocturnal Federation members. We usually start an hour before the night cycle and go an hour over into the night cycle. This is so that we are all a little uncomfortable and no one is at a complete advantage. During the day, I can send you with one of my technical engineers so that you can relay those messages to your portable. They can also make it so that you can access any information that is stored on your ship's computers.
I think that would be perfect.
I'm glad I can accommodate. How about I send my technician to you in the morning, and you can both go down to the dining hall in the morning and then to your ship after?
Sisveta asked.
It sounds great.
The next morning, Mira was just headed into the living portion of the room when the entry opened. In walked a skeet she hadn't seen before. At least she didn't think she had seen them before. So early into meeting these aliens meant that they unfortunately looked a lot like each other. This skeet was a little lighter in color than Sisveta, with a few darker patches on its visible skin.
Greetings and warm rocks to you, Mira Rodriguez. My name is Zanatla. Many new aliens are unable to tell apart the skeet and Juten genders. Males always think it is obvious and do not think of such things. If they have not told you already, both the captain and chief medical officer are males. I am female. Juten females have a narrower snout and shorter defense spikes. Female skeets have longer tails.
She turned so that Mira could see that her tail was noticeably longer than Sisveta's had been.
However, our names will always give it away. Male names always start with a HS, and female names always start with a CLK.
Those were letters they didn't translate, but I think I understand anyway. It's nice to meet you, Zanatla. You can just call me Mira.
Mira walked towards the entryway and put her belt on.
I understand we were going to head to the dining hall first, or, if you aren't hungry yet, we don't have to go right now.
Oh no, I am hungry enough to try Juten food.
She excitedly shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Mira chuckled.
That sounds really hungry.
Zanatla chuckled and continued towards the dining hall. As they were in line, Zanatla asked,
I was told you are an omnivore. Is that correct?
Yes, I understand you are an herbivore, so I'll stick to the herbivore side of the line.
Do you not need meat?
Yes and no. There are certain nutrients that humans need that aren't found in plants. However, if we do not want to ever eat meat for religious or personal reasons, there are dietary supplements we can take to meet those needs. If we choose to eat meat, we don't have to eat it every meal, or even every day. A couple of times a week is more than enough to meet those needs. I had meat yesterday with the chief medical officer, so I can eat these foods today without any worries or issues.
That is good to know.
They continued to chat and get to know each other while they ate, and Zanatla led her to her ship once they were finished. Mira learned that Zanatla had an interest in older tech, which is why Sisveta had requested her to be the one to help. Zanatla was thoroughly enjoying learning about old tech from Mira, while also teaching her how to work with some of the newer tech they had on the ship. Zanatla was fascinated by the various tools Mira used and was eager to show Mira the variations of those tools that were used now.
You mean, if a panel won't go into place, you just pound it into submission with this?
Zanatla asked, holding up a hammer.
Not that one. Not if I don't want to damage the panel. I would use this one.
Mira held up a rubber-headed mallet. Zanatla was enthralled with the shape and weight of the two different hammer types.
And it works?
She asked incredulously. Mira chuckled and answered in the affirmative.
Yours is a very strange species, Mira.
Once Zanatla set everything up, she produced a pair of items. They were very similar to the receiver sensor for a wireless mouse or keyboard. The difference was they both looked the exact same.
I could have wired you into the ship's computer system, but galactic law states that unless a ship has been abandoned or all occupants have expired, all information held on those systems is the sole property of the ship owner. In this case, that is you. I have wired in a place to attach this sender to your ship for you, and this one is the receiver.
She pointed to a place on the portable.
If you place it here, you will have access to all of your ship's systems, bar the ability to turn on propulsion or similar things such as weapons if they are on board. I didn't see anything that looked like a weapon display, though.
No. The Discovery here was only a scientific scouting ship. We didn't know there was anyone else in the entire galaxy. We searched and we listened, but never found anything.
Can you show me what your communications wiring looks like?
Mira showed her, and they were able to look without making any changes to it.
This style is very old. We have no receivers for it. It is possible a fledgling species may still use something similar, but no species we know of would have been able to hear you. It is a good thing that the emergency distress signal was not changed.
Where is that housed? We didn't add any kind of signal, so I'd like to know what it looks like.
Zanatla agreed and disappeared into the compartment that housed all the wiring, scooting on her belly. She stopped moving after a bit, and then after some rummaging, she made a loud hiss that translated like a gasp. And then she was scrambling out of the compartment.
We must hail the captain immediately.
She grabbed Mira's wrist as she ran to the main screen in the docking bay.
Wait.
She turned to Mira and grabbed at the portable and removed the receiver before turning back to the main screen.
Why don't we call him from the portable?
2 reasons. The first is that portables in the docking bay are disabled. It's a safety measure, and I'm so glad for it. The second is that if you had tried, our systems would have been breached.
Zanatla quickly contacted Sesveta.
Technician Zanatla, it is good to see you.
He stopped and noticed her agitated condition.
What is wrong?
Captain, I need you to come to the docking bay and leave your portable there. Do not bring it with you.
I will be down shortly.
The screen went dark again.
Captain Esesveta had his portable with him when he first met me.
What I encountered wasn't going to be able to activate until non-human technology was introduced to it. That didn't happen until we connected your portable to your ship. Once that happened, it infected your portable, but because all portables are forced to deactivate in the docking bay as a safety precaution, it was not able to infect the rest of the computer system of the ship.
She scented Mira's worry in the air.
Humans would not know how to do this. We know where you were headed, and we know you didn't know where it was you were actually going. This is a known Imperia tactic. You are safe.
Once Esesveta appeared, Zanatla explained what she saw. The normal device used for sending a distress signal was there, but hidden right next to it was an Empyrean infection trap. The tracker was new-looking, so Zanatla guessed that the humans either thought it was important and added it, or they couldn't get the rest of the navigation system to work without adding it, which was a standard protocol feature in ships. It is possible that it was intended for the crew to fall victim to the asteroid field and die. The distress beacon would go off, and due to no one left alive on the ship, the first Federation ship to encounter the human ship would end up infecting their own computers when they connected to the human ship. Or if the humans survived, it's possible the Empyreans would take the humans and then set the ship adrift, for some unsuspecting Federation ship to, again, collect it and infect themselves.
We will need to get you a new one of these. Unfortunately, I must destroy this one.
Sisveta explained, taking the portable from Mira.
Zanatla, go and get the sender from the ship. It's been compromised. Any of our wires or adapters as well as the tool set you used.
She raced off to do as he said.
Why her tools?
The trap will infect and hide out within anything that is not human tech. That reminds me, all 3 of our belts will need to be replaced. It activated only when new tech was used directly on the ship. That's why my belt was fine until I got close to your portable now. Our tools, as you saw, are not used with muscle or mechanical movement. Ours use technology to do everything your basic tools do. If I need to remove a screw, I can point a Clyek at it, press a button, and the screw will loosen until it falls into a hand or the ground. Then, the infection spreads to any other tech, regardless of whether they touch or not. The only reason this screen was not affected is because it has a special seal that keeps it separate from this room, but is still usable while in this room. A technician might be able to explain it better. We are just lucky we didn't have any other ships in this bay. If we had, they would have all had to be destroyed.
Why would the infection not infect human tech?
Mira asked.
It's because of where it was. It was using human tech as its host, so won't infect human tech. It would have been installed using human tech. So once we remove the items that have been infected, we will all go back, and you will have to show her how to use your tools. She will use them to put the device in a containment box that is like a smaller but more powerful version of the docking bay. It will be unable to infect anything outside of the box, and the box itself creates a null effect, so it cannot even infect the box. We can then safely handle the device and bring new tech back into your ship and set it up like we wanted to do originally. It's just going to be a few extra steps now.
Once Zanatla returned with the items, Sisveta went to a locker along the edge of the room and removed a spherical device that was large enough to put the portable and odds and ends from the ship, as well as the tool set inside. Zanatla explained,
That spherical device will contain the infected items, and the captain will put it into an incinerator. Once I contain the infection trap, we will have to do the same with our belts. The captain will stay so that he can help us with the belts, you more than me. This bay is set to skeet preferences because there are more skeets in this bay than any other species at the moment. It's to help the belts conserve energy. I will be fine without the belt, but you will feel lightheaded, and your gravity is greater than ours, so you will begin to float immediately. When we are ready to do this, I will have you take a deep breath before we remove the belt, and then the captain and I will tow you to the main hall where there will be a belt waiting for each of us.
As she spoke, both skeets were removing their belts to add to the incinerator, while Mira kept hers on. Sisveta added,
Everything will be just fine. Your endurance test showed that this should be easy for you.
The procedure went as planned. When the device was safely stored, they got into place at the exit of the Discovery. Zanatla took hold of the belt, ready to remove it, and Mira took a deep breath. Zanatla quickly removed the belt and took off running towards the incinerator, while Sisveta grabbed a hold of Mira's wrist and dragged her behind him. With the lighter gravity, Mira quickly used the moon hop and passed Sisveta quickly. She had to wait a few moments for him to catch up, and they went inside together. The hall was still set to skeet atmosphere, so they were lucky. The Juten gravity was higher than the skeets, but still lower than the human gravity, but it would have made movement more difficult for Sisveta. Mira was holding her nose to keep herself from taking a lungful of the lower atmosphere, which would cause her to pass out at this point. Sisveta grabbed a belt, pressed a button, and said,
Human Mira,
and then put it on her. Her sphere immediately formed without her having to go through all the settings it had previously. She had completely forgotten how that was the first time and was immediately grateful these belts had memory settings. Mira took a deep breath, while Sisveta set up his own as well as one for Zanatla, who entered the hall shortly after.
Oh, I'm so glad it wasn't set for Jotun.
I am as well.
Sisveta replied and then quickly explained the differences to Mira.
That makes 3 of us then.
This is very troubling. The Federation will need to know. Zanatla, I trust this will remain between the 3 of us until after the meeting tonight. There is no point in worrying the crew until we already have a course of action.
Of course, Captain. Now that the ship has been detoxed from the infection, if you do not mind, I can set up everything as we were intending to, and I can bring a new receiver to Mira to connect to the new portable she will be issued.
Yes, I think that will be good. It is getting late. How about we have the evening meal, and then you both can head back to do that? There should be enough time before the meeting tonight.
This was agreeable to them all, so they headed to the dining hall together. Dinner went fine, and Sisveta let Zanatla and Mira know how much time they had before he needed to present Mira to the council and where he could meet her.
It won't take us much time to do this, now that we have already done it once. I will make sure Mira is there on time.
They headed to the technician's supply closet and signed out a new portable for Mira. Zanatla had known they would be working in the docking bay, so had not brought her own portable, as it would be useless while there. She also picked up a new tool set that she would be able to replace the docking bay's set they had to destroy, as well as the parts she had needed for the setup. Once she had them in hand, they headed back to Mira's ship. What had taken a few hours to do before was now able to be done in a half hour, now that everything they needed to get to before was exposed and prepped. Zanatla was also able to show Mira the distress signal beacon. Zanatla explained how the navigation systems they had copied wouldn't work without this part.
That makes sense. I knew there were things we didn't understand how or why they worked, but that they had to be included in order to make the ship work. It was good to get that mystery resolved.
They spent a little time in the Discovery chatting more and getting a better understanding of each other's culture. When it was time to meet up with the captain, they went.
How did you like meeting your counterpart technician?
Sisveta asked.
It was different. In some ways, it was like being a new engineer working with an old pro who has worked on everything. But in others, it was like working with a normal peer. It was fun to be able to both learn and teach, even if what I was teaching was ancient to her.
I am glad you enjoyed each other's company. I could tell that Zanatla was having a good time.
They were now heading off of the ship. They were at the very end of any species that would enter the building. The first to go in would be the nocturnal. They would enter the council chambers first, and they had a special enclosure within the chamber that had very low lighting within it, and the exterior of it was made of darkened glass. This allowed the daytime species to still be able to see while keeping the nocturnals safe from the bright light. Once they were settled, they would press a button that would raise the lighting and make a tone outside the chamber, alerting everyone else they could enter. Mira and Sisveta would be waiting until they were specifically called in to speak. Because this was an emergency meeting, they didn't need to wait while other business was talked about, so it was only a few minutes after the meeting began that they were brought in. There was a dais at the open end of a horseshoe-shaped stadium seating chamber. There were many species here, but there weren't so many rows that anyone became hard to see.
Sisveta, son of Stadal, captain of the Galactic Federation destroyer Black Hole, please tell of the events that have brought you and this new alien species to this council meeting.
Commanded the speaker. The speaker was very tall and spindly-looking. She had 4 spider-like legs and 2 more limbs that acted like arms. Her head didn't have a discernible nose, had 4 obsidian-colored eyes, and her mouth had little tiny arms in front of it like a crab. Sisveta had shown her pictures of the speaker as well as the members of the council that tended to speak more as well as their names and species names. While Sisveta spoke, Mira racked her mind. She's a Quix. And her name is Chris? No, that's the name of the Juten. But it was similar, wasn't it? Syrixa. That was it. Sisveta had mentioned that the Quix all have an X in their name. Well, he called it an SSS, I think. Mira focused back on what Sisveta was saying while looking at the assembled council. She noticed small shifts here and there. When he said where Mira came from, She could see more glances towards her as well as open stares. She also noticed a few outright smirks. Compared to some of these aliens, she certainly didn't look like anything to write home about. He also directed them to look at their own portables as Mira's diagnostics had been sent to everyone. Mira could tell they had not looked at it prior to now. Politicians are the same, everywhere it seems. There were several more species looking at her more closely, looking down at their portables, and then back up at Mira.
Are these readings accurate, Captain Sveta?
That one is Chris. Mira smiled.
They were taken by my chief medical officer, Clarud. All of the chemical analysis is correct. However, the endurance and strength testing are likely incorrect.
There were visible signs of relief. And then Sveta completed the sentence.
Because she had already been awake for roughly 20 hours, with little rest or nourishment due to having to make repairs to her ship's life support systems. Alone.
There were a few gasps and other noises of disbelief.
Due to other concerns, we did not feel a need to make her go through the testing again.
Other concerns?
Chris asked. Sveta then told them where Mira was headed prior to the ship being damaged. This caused many noises of outrage and even accusations that the humans were joining the Imperia. To this, Sveta pulled out his portable, tapped in a few commands, and then on a large screen behind her and the captain that she hadn't noticed upon entering was a recording of that encounter from when Mira showed Clarud where she was heading until Sveta referred to her as a skeetling neglecting her sleep cycle.
Mira does not know if her government knows about the aliens hiding on their planet or not. I do know from what Mira has told me, the Imperia have set up a scrambler which has blocked any Federation ships from picking up Earth signals and Earth from picking up any foreign signals. Mira states that they thought it was what they refer to as a natural wonder and even named it.
He sighed and then continued.
There is more. One of my engineers was helping Mira to have access to her ship records and stumbled upon an Empyrean infection trap. We were lucky that we only lost a portable, some electronics, 3 belts, and a tool set. We are here seeking guidance for the humans. Under Federation law, I remind you that Mira is not a government official, negotiator, ambassador, or is in any way a voice for the human species. She can only speak for herself and speak through her own experiences.
He stepped a few paces to the side to allow Mira to take the center of the dais. She knew that Sveta had said that, at the end as a reminder that nothing she said could be used as a binding agreement for her whole species. Sveta had made sure she knew what her rights were, what they were allowed to ask, and what he would need to tell them. It was Mira who has suggested the recording when she learned about the slaver races. One of the first things Clarud had told her was that all that was said or did in the medical bay was recorded, so that if any misunderstandings happened, there was proof of all that occurred.
Are your species one government or many?
Asked a species as Sveta had not prepped her for. Mira would have called it mammalian. There was certainly hair. It looked like it might reach her collarbone in height. 2 legs, 2 arms, no tail. The nose was a bit flatter, like how a capuchin monkey's nose was. The hair was short and covered its entire body to the point that if it had clothing of any kind, it was not visible. Even George Lucas did not prepare me for this.
We have many countries that each have their own government, but most of those governments belong to a United Nations. The United Nations is not a ruling body, but they help to maintain peace between countries during disputes. They can also apply pressure on their members to end situations that the rest of the members don't agree with.
There were other questions that were to clarify the test results, as well as questions about population.
I do not know the current population of the Earth, or even of just my own country.
Questions about military.
I am not authorized to speak about the militaries of any country on my planet.
How long humans had been exploring space.
Through telescopes, several centuries, but physically, approximately 100 years.
She was allowed to move back to where Sveta stood. They were both excused while the council debated with each other. The hall was quiet. Mira grasped her hands so that it would not be as obvious she was coming down from an adrenaline rush.
How are you feeling?
Sisveta tasted the air.
Nervous. I don't usually have to speak in front of so many people.
You get used to it when you lead. It was very nerve-wracking when I commanded my first ship. Unless you crash the ship, no one remembers the little mistakes. I was very happy when I didn't crash the ship.
They chuckled together. It seemed to take nearly the entire time allotted to the council meeting, but it was decided that Sisveta would meet with another Federation captain whose crew was peopled by other species who were all from Class Black home worlds, and Mira would be transferred to them. This crew's captain would be authorized to act as ambassador. As they walked back to the ship, Mira's portable beeped, which notified her that there was an incoming communication from her ship. Sisveta guided her into an empty room so that she could answer it. Once inside, Mira took a deep breath and then answered, glad it was only a recording. Commander Morris was red-faced with anger.
Chief Rodriguez, how dare you desecrate the bodies of your colleagues? You're a goddamned machinist, mate, and you're telling me you couldn't seal off a room and drop the temperature to preserve them.
He went on in this vein for a few more minutes, and then ended with,
I want a full report of damages to the ship and how you have conducted yourself. See that I don't speak with your commanding officer and have you bumped down to a base engineering aide.
When the video went out, Mira scoffed.
The ventilation system would have needed a reroute in order to do what he said, and I would have had to fabricate the parts from scratch with zero materials. I was lucky I was able to repair the life support systems from scratch with what I had on board.
He is not your commanding officer?
For this mission, he is. When we first started to go into space, they used members of our military with flight experience. Since then, NASA trained their own people. As we started unlocking and reverse engineering the crashed vessel, a new branch of military was created. However, this voyage was not a military voyage, but an exploratory voyage. NASA can bring some of the greatest engineers together, and they do. But for this voyage, they wanted an engineer that could think on their feet should there be emergencies. I am a member of a branch that deals in the kind of ships that are in water, not air or even space. However, a naval engineer must be able to think on their feet. I tested among the highest with a number of tests, like my ability to not lose my lunch under higher G-forces. Being as small as I am helped, too. A larger person would have a harder time getting into some of the spaces on the ship.
Small?
This was not a topic that had come up. It was also fairly rude to ask a new species if they were the runts of the litter. Mira laughed.
Humans come in all sorts of sizes. I'm on the shorter end of that spectrum. My fiancé has about a foot on me.
Sisveta was confused, so she showed with her hands.
He's about this much taller than I am.
He? I don't understand. A word didn't translate. You're what?
Oh. If two humans like each other and decide they want to permanently live with one another, they will announce an engagement. The people in that engagement refer to each other as their fiancé. We both got permission from our commanding officers, so we will get married soon. We were planning on after this mission to get together to go over details better and finally set a date.
That sounds complicated,
Sisveta replied.
It can be.
She agreed. It was going to take a few days for Black Hole to meet up with the other ship. It was another destroyer named the Meteor. Sisveta let Mira know that her ship would need to be able to travel. She would need to be able to pilot her ship from the bay it was in, move out away from Black Hole, and then the Meteor would pull her ship into itself with its own tractor beam.
I believe you were working on your ship when we came across you. Is it flight-worthy?
No. At least one of the thrusters is damaged, and I need to respond to my commander.
She replied.
I'll have Zanatla come by in the morning to help you work on your ship. You would be able to return a message as well. Have you decided how you want to broach the subject of alien life to your people?
I have. I think that I don't want them to know until we are hailing for a place to sit down. Captain, humans tend to think the worst when they get left with their thoughts for too long. We call it an echo chamber. It will take us a few days to meet up with the meteor, and then several more days to reach Earth, I assume. That's a potential week to panic, and a potential week for the Imperia to make their move. I think that to give them that time would be a mistake.
Sisveta was happy that Mira had made the decision to wait. He was also worried that the Imperia would intercept her transmission and make the first move. Humans were not a part of the Federation, so he could not interfere with her decisions. He could offer advice if asked, but could not offer it simply because he wanted to. The next morning, Zanatla picked Mira up for breakfast and then headed to the docking bay. Mira knew that this was to give her someone to ask questions, as much as for them to keep track of the alien. No alien would have been allowed to wander free on a military ship back home, so she didn't take offense. Back on board her ship, Mira grabbed the parts bag she had been using to fix the thruster, added a few more parts to it from the supply closet, and grabbed her tool bag.
Do you use ladders, platforms, or something else to get to high places to repair things?
Mira asked. Zanatla grinned.
Something much better.
She guided Mira out of the ship and then showed her the buttons to press on her belt.
You forget that our belts also control our personal gravities.
Zanatla began to float. She then used her hands and feet against the ship to push herself into position near the damaged thruster. Mira pressed the buttons as she was shown and felt that zero-gravity effect. She maneuvered herself as Zanatla had done so that she didn't float past the thruster.
Here, I'll be your anchor.
Zanatla offered. She undid a small piece from her belt and attached it to a spot on Mira's belt. She suddenly felt like Batman with his utility belt. It took a few hours to make the repair. Had Mira been doing it alone, she would have been done much faster, but having someone to talk to like this did not lend itself to efficiency. It wasn't like Mira had anywhere to go, so taking longer to do the repair didn't bother her. Once finished, they used the ship to crawl back down closer to the floor, and Zanatla showed her how to go back to her own gravity and drop down to the bay floor. Mira envied Zanatla her tail. It clearly helped the skeet with balance. Once inside the ship, Mira ran another system scan. Everything came back clear.
I should be good.
You should still do a test hover, as well as a movement check. This bay is large enough and your craft small enough that it could be done. I will go inform the captain of the test.
Before Mira could say anything, she was gone. It was only a few minutes before she returned.
Captain Sveta has given his permission. He would have been notified of such movements, and it is not good to make your captain worry.
Right.
Mira turned to the controls and contemplated them. Technically, she could fly this ship. Technically, a 12-year-old can drive a car. It's just not in your best interest to be anywhere near them if they do.
You haven't piloted this before, have you?
No, I've seen it done, and if we were out in space, I wouldn't be worried.
Mira replied.
Then it is good you have me. I have test piloted many smaller vessels such as this after repairs. You will need to translate the words on the controls, but I don't see this as being too difficult.
Her tail seemed to wave in what Mira translated as excitement. As she set the ship up to power up, she explained what she was doing. This part Mira understood, but it was still nice to hear it from another perspective. Zanatla had the craft lift to hover, had it turn, moved it forward, had it turn the opposite way, and then move back to the spot it had been in. She then tried a reverse, moved it back to the starting position, and then set it back down.
The control felt a little clunky to me. Did it feel normal to you?
Yeah, it felt normal. Thanks for showing me. I'll need to be able to move this out of the docking bay and into space, and I'd like to not cause damage while doing that.
I can set you up with a simulator. Creating the program won't be that difficult. I would be able to utilize parts of simulation programs already available and then just match the controls to what is here. You would just need to ensure you add your written language to the translator, so you will see your words instead of my words on the screen.
They moved back towards the main screen for the docking bay, and Zanatla sent a message to the captain that the testing was complete.
I'd really appreciate that. I still need to send a message back to my commander.
May I watch?
I don't plan on saying anything that would be secret. As long as you stay out of the camera view, we should be fine.
Once they were back in the ship, Mira pulled out a cart and began loading it with everything from the supply closet and then dropping it off at the control room, arraying like items with each other. It only took 2 trips, the last containing being a mostly depleted spool of wire. Had she run out of that wire, she would have likely died as well. She had wanted more items for the supply closet, but had been denied due to weight and space available. As she was doing this, Zanatla could only understand a few words here and there. She was pretty sure Mira had switched to another language at some point. There was no way that at this point there would be that much of her language that hadn't been translated.
That stupid son of a bitch thinks he has any clue what I can and can't do with this pile of shit. He needs to take his head out of his ass real quick.
After that, Mira visibly calmed. It was rather frightening to see and scent her anger so strongly, and then have it all disappear in a moment. She scented the air again. Now it just scented of authority and calm, but not a normal calm. Mira took another deep breath and then directed Zanetla on where to stand. Once Mira's attention was to the controls, she pressed a button on her jacket that would record the exchange. Sisveta would be interested to know what was said.
Good morning, Commander Morris. You required a detailed accounting of my actions, and it took a little while to ensure I was giving you all the information you would require.
She tapped a few buttons, and there was a new screen in front of her, instead of seeing Mira reflected in the viewer.
As you can see from this ship schematic, these markings here are the ventilation systems. These are where the wiring is for system controls. This is the wiring for auxiliary power, and this is the wiring for the life support systems. I suspect this part of the ship is where you would think I could change into a refrigeration room, however, due to this system here.
She marked a part of the ventilation system.
That would be impossible to do without a hull breach. This would tax the life support system, and even returning immediately would not ensure I could return home. You likely are now thinking that I should have been able to fabricate a way to do this.
She changed back to the camera mode instead of the presenting mode.
Here is everything that was left after my necessary repairs were made. You also have a list of all replacement and repair parts that were in the ship's supply closet. With your master's degree in thermodynamics and minor in material science from the United States Merchant Marine Academy, as well as your certifications as a certified systems engineering professional and a master's certified electronics technician, please explain to me in great detail on how you would use these parts to fabricate the necessary systems to turn any room into this ship into a space cold enough to stop decomposition without also putting undue strain on the rest of the ship. In addition, I would also like to know why it was that we have the location and trajectory of every piece of space rock larger than a basketball from Earth to Alpha Centauri, yet did not have that asteroid field mapped out, because I have a few choice words to say to them. I would like to report that I have completely replaced the life support systems due to an electrical shortage that fried every single life support wire and panel relay, as well as replaced the necessary parts in the port thruster. The ship is back to normal handling. Chief Machinist Mate Mira Rodriguez out.
She ended the recording and breathed out a sigh of relief before turning back to the parts and loading them all back up and getting them into place in the supply closet. As she cleaned up, Zanatla turned off the recorder and moved out of the place she had been directed to.
He doesn't have those credentials, does he?
Mira chuckled.
No, his credentials would be in a very different field. I can't remember what they are at the moment, but I do know it wasn't in engineering.
Soon enough, everything was packed up.
He'll probably send for a disciplinary action on my return, but then he would also have to hand over the recording to prove it. My commanding officer and his superior both like me too much to do it blindly, considering they are both vastly more experienced than I am. It's possible they might have thought of something I didn't, but to be able to do it under duress and in the moment would be extremely unlikely. The additional parts I had requested would have probably been able to do it, though. It was my commanding officer that helped me to come up with the list in the first place. He was also unhappy. The additional parts had been denied. They called him paranoid, and he called them short-sighted. I hear it was a beautiful argument,
Zanetla chuckled. She also understood how different departments might not fully appreciate the more technical departments like hers until she came up with a miracle when it was suddenly needed. Captain Esesveda was a good captain, and Zanetla was thankful each year she was able to serve with him again. The next day, the simulator was ready, so Zanetla brought Mira to her own room in the ship. This room looked much more lived in. There was what looked like a glass-topped desk that faced the main screen. This is where she directed Mira to sit. Zanetla adjusted the desk, and Mira saw that it was a giant digital keyboard which soon took on images that looked much like the control panel of her ship. When she looked up, the main screen looked like it was in a bay.
This is amazing. You did this in one night?
It wasn't that hard. Many systems were already created. I only had to make some minor adjustments.
Mira knew when someone was downplaying what they accomplished.
Take the praise. You deserve it.
Zanetla was flustered and quickly began to go over the controls. After a few hours, Zanetla declared Mira to be a natural.
Thank you for being such a good teacher.
I don't want to have to repair anything you may break.
She chuckled and Mira joined in. It was an uneventful day and a half before Black Hole met up with the meteor. The evening before, Sisveta had gone over the species names of the crew she would be going to, as well as the names and ranks of some of the people she would likely be working closely with. They were getting ready for the transfer when Sisveta asked,
"How is your echo chamber?"
He tapped his head. Mira smiled.
It's been pretty quiet. Thank you for assigning Zanetla to be my babysitter. Her company helped to keep out the worry.
Was it so obvious?
It only made sense to have someone always in the company of the alien on a military vessel. It would have been the same if our roles had been reversed, and you were the stranded alien in our system. I hope I didn't keep her away from any needful tasks.
You didn't. Feel free to contact either of us. I had Zanetla set us both up as contacts, as well as Klarud. You may feel more comfortable to speak to someone you have been around longer, or you may have questions that you worry will cause offense. If you continue to add your written language, you will be able to send written messages instead of video calls if you wish it. I wish good fortunes to you.
Thank you.
Mira took a breath and headed to her ship. She was given a signal to start up the ship, and once she was hovering, the bay doors were opened. She headed forward, cleared the doorway, and headed deeper into space. After she was about 200 yards out, she saw the other destroyer some ways away still. She headed in that direction, and after another 400 yards or so, the light of a tractor beam enveloped her ship. She took her hands off the controls and let the meteor haul her in and set her down. Once sat down, she turned off the engine, gathered her things, and headed to the exit. Sisveta had told her to open the door and then wait for the crew to come to her for her safety. She opened the door and waited at the threshold. She heard their voices first, and then the sounds of their feet on the floor. She knew that they would be much taller and larger than her, but being told this and seeing it for herself were worlds apart. It was also strange to see old, legendary creatures in the flesh. You know that old fringe theory that octopi were aliens because they didn't follow any other branch of evolution? They are. What we know as octopi are actually a primitive and devolution of the descendants of criminals. That was Mira's first shock. The Flexusri had used ancient Earth as a prison world in much the same way Australia had been intended as a prison colony. They no longer held any kinship with our octopi and were now very separate species. The second shock was that gargoyles were real. They weren't squat or ugly dog beasts either. Oh no, they were 7-foot tall, winged like a bat-gray bipedal beings with gray skin. And no, they didn't turn to stone during the day. In fact, despite being gray, they didn't look stony at all. How did gargoyles, no, I'm sorry, Drala get on Earth, you may ask? Because Mira sure did. Sisveta wasn't sure, but believed it may have been a crash landing. Several centuries ago, Earth was not known to have sapient beings on it, so it could have easily been a scouting trip. And knowing humans at that time, the Drala would have been seen as demons. Maybe they helped someone, and that's how they became church guardians. Who knows? It was nearly maddening to be confronted with so many legends at once. The third shock was, of course, the Asili. They were a nocturnal species that Mira recognized as a damn big foot. Sisveta believed the Asili were seen on Earth much the same way as the Drala. However, because they were a more recent legend, he believed that after that grainy image surfaced, the Imperia would have hunted them down and disposed of them and their ship. Mira took a deep breath. It wasn't every day you meet gargoyles, big feet, and giant sapient octopi. A Drala and a Flaxusri came into view. The sphere around the Flaxusri had a mist within it. The species was comfortable in water the most, but could spend time on land. Like a frog, however, their skin would dry out over time, so on their own world had a lightweight harness that sprayed them at intervals. In space, however, it was easier for the belts to maintain their sphere with a mist. They walked on 4 of their tentacles and used the other 4 as arms. Thinking too hard about the genetic differences between the Flaxusri and Octopi made her head hurt. Biologists back home will have a field day. That might not end well. She made a mental note to let them know about the potential issues. While non-binary humans were more common and accepted these days, she had to remember that Flaxusri were always they-them because their species were hermaphrodites. That was a fun conversation to have with Sisveta. The Drala looked at Mira, looked down at his portable, and then back up at her. He finally spoke.
You are an adult of your species?
The Flaxusri smacked the Drala with a tentacle.
Were you raised in a...
Mira didn't know what it was, but mentally replaced it with barn. They gestured to Mira.
Come on down.
Once she was standing near them, the Flaxusri continued.
I am Rear Admiral Vebi, and this mannerless fool is my Lieutenant Commander Fennis. Come, let us welcome you to the Meteor. Captain Sisveta says you are Chief Machinist Mate Mira Rodriguez of Earth. He said you frequently drop your rank and just go by Mira. Is this correct?
Yes, my rank is a bit of a mouthful and seemed silly to enforce it in a place so far from home.
It is rather long, but you earned this rank, did you not?
She nodded.
How about a shortened version?
CMM Mira, it's the initials of the ranking with my first name.
First name. Yes, this is something Captain Sisveta mentioned. We use son of, daughter of, or spawn of in place of your last names. There is an even longer version that includes our planet and landmass names, but these are typically dropped in favor of ending with just our own names. When we are in space, it makes giving orders quicker.
Mira chuckled.
I can understand that. We frequently will also be given a middle name, and you only hear all 3 of your names when you're in trouble.
They were heading out of the docking bay and traveling down a hall.
Ah, yes. There is nothing worse than being a spawning and having your full name called out by your birth giver. It made everyone swim home in a hurry.
Okay. No. They may look strange and sound strange, but it's like talking with an old friend. Are they usually so personable? Fennis has barely said a word besides calling me small.
What are your thoughts, Lieutenant Commander Fennis?
Rear Admiral Vebi asked.
Are we sure she comes from a Class Black planet, Rear Admiral? I don't mean offense CMM Mira. Your file says that your species has no natural defenses. Your claws are blunt and thin, your fangs are small and blunt. I just don't see it.
Mira smiled, an almost predatory smile, as they both looked her over.
How long is your galactic day? I understand it can change from ship to ship based on species needs.
Vebi answered.
We are also a 20-hour ship.
Chief Medical Officer Clarude did my physical testing after I was already up for about 20 hours with little food or water in that time. My species is used to a 24-hour day cycle. Those readings are not accurate. That is how my species survived on a Class Black planet.
Fennis looked Mira up and down.
I don't believe it.
Vebi smacked Fennis again.
Humans are a lot tougher than we look.
Don't mind the Lieutenant Commander. He had a long day and an early morning. I'm sure he'll remember his manners by tomorrow.
Vebi cut in. Fennis had the good grace to look uncomfortable.
Here is your room. We had to make a few adjustments to accommodate your height, but it should be similar to the room you used on Black Hole. Take your time to settle in, and I'll have someone come by to show you around. The layout is similar to Black Hole as well.
There's my babysitter. Mira entered the room and used her belt to set the atmosphere and gravity for the room, and she was left alone. She noticed that the furniture in the room looked a little larger, as did the bed, but it was a similar style-looking nest, like the beds back on Black Hole. She unpacked and settled in with her portable to start adding more written language to it, as well as some English idioms. There was nothing worse than using a perfect idiom and to have no one understand it. After a few hours, a flexus re-entered the room.
Oh, I hope you weren't waiting for me. I'm Dino. I'll be the one showing you around.
I think you gave me your rank, but it didn't translate. I'm Chief Machinist Mate Mira. We can shorten that to CMM Mira, if you like.
Dino tapped his beak, which was underneath him, just as an octopus's mouth is. It looked strange, but still conveyed the same expression of a human trying to think of how to say a thing in a different way.
I am not in the officer ranks. I'm in fact very new to service.
Sounds like we would call you a seaman, but I suppose that wouldn't translate as we are definitely not in the water.
We are a water-loving species, and I like the sound of it. I think it will be sufficient. Your species separates its military into reefs?
They were sitting together in the sitting area of the room.
Branches, but yes. A branch that specializes in water shouldn't be the one telling ground troops where to go or what to do on the ground. But we work with each other very well. We know how to support each other where the other lacks.
I suppose I could see why that would make sense.
Deno stood up.
Are you hungry?
Yes. I understand your people, and the Drala are both carnivores and the Asili are omnivores. Will there be any non-meat available even though it's still in the day cycle? I can go without meat, but to only have meat for too long isn't good for my species.
Yes! Our cook staff were notified of your needs, so there will be non-meat available at all meals while you are with us.
Deno answered. In the dining hall, there was the expected staring and the startled responses when she would whip around to catch a group staring at her.
How do you do that?
Deno asked.
Do what?
Always catch them staring.
When you were growing up, did you have to worry about something larger or stronger than you turning you into food?
Not growing up. Our communities were very safe, but if you went out to the wild waters, there were possibilities to be another's meal.
How did you keep yourselves safe from that?
If it was big enough, you feel the current of the water shift, but we would never go into the wilds alone. We would all lose our ink glands and darken the water so we can get away. But we can also change our colors to hide.
They changed their skin tones briefly to demonstrate.
So if they surprise you?
Dino moved their tentacles.
Was that a nonverbal communication?
Oh, yes, it was. It's easy to forget that you don't know. That meant death. We have a whole nonverbal language. Our sounds aren't loud enough in the water to carry, so we use tentacle language. This is our land language. It's still not very loud, but we had to develop it when we encountered our world's land sapient. We are the only home planet with two sapient species, one for land and one for sea. Our people work together to develop space travel.
That sounds like it could have been a very difficult time.
It was. How about your home planet? Are there other sapient species?
Not really. There are some that are really intelligent, and there are some we have taught to communicate with us, but nothing that we would call sapient. Sentient, yes, just not sapient.
They talked for a little while of the methods humans used to communicate with their sentient animals. They were on their way back to Mira's room when she asked,
Is there a way I can request to speak to the heads of the ship before we make it to my planet?
Yes, I can show you.
They entered Mira's room, and Deno went to the main screen for the room and sent in the request.
There you go. They will figure out a good day and time and send you a response if they agree to it. I don't see why they wouldn't. You will all need to be able to talk to each other before landing anyway to make a plan of action.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Dino showed Mira how to get in touch with them if she needed anything before morning meal. It was as Dino was leaving that Mira had never answered on how she knew when others were looking at her that were outside of Mira's sight. Did she have another set of eyes hidden on the back of her head? The next morning, Deno stopped by to walk with Mira to the dining hall. As they ate, Deno asked again about why Mira knew when someone was watching her and asked about another eye set on the back of her head. Mira laughed.
No, humans only have the one set. Humans can't ink or change our skin colors like that. We can't fly like the Drala, and our skin isn't extra thick like the Asili. By myself, I'm pretty defenseless. So, humans developed a sense for when we might be stalked by a predator. We have it to greater and lesser degrees, and it gets amped up when we are alone or in an unfamiliar place. The chief medical officer on Black Hole said he hadn't heard of it before, but he isn't from a class black planet and probably isn't around us much. Is this not normal for even class blacks?
I have never heard of it before. So, what happens when you identify the one staring and they are a predator?
It all depends on what it is. For some, you have to watch and make yourself look bigger. Some you have to play dead and hope they don't hurt you too bad when they look you over. Some you have to fight back and hope they change their mind, but there aren't many we can outrun. Most of the time it's pay attention and move away slowly so you don't make it think you are prey, so they chase.
Your world sounds frightening. What about your waters?
It can be, and it can also be very peaceful and beautiful. Our waters are about the same. There are a lot of things in the water that would see us as predators, and so would flee. There are monstrously huge creatures that are relatively harmless, and there are creatures that would try to harm you.
Mira replied. They ate for a while, and then Mira asked,
Is there anywhere on the ship for exercise? I'm not used to being so inactive.
Sure. We have a large pool for the Flexusri and a dry place for the Drala and Asili. Do your people swim?
We can, but it's not something most of us do every day or even every year.
Dino gasped.
To spend a whole year outside of water would be horrible.
I'm sure it would be for you.
Mira replied.
We can go to the dry grounds after we finish eating.
Thank you.
As they entered the workout area, which only had Drala in it, everyone stopped and stared as Mira and Deno entered.
I don't think I'm going to get used to that.
Mira muttered to Deno.
Yes, it does come across as hostile, doesn't it?
As if Deno's words made the Drala realize they were staring, they quickly went back to what they were doing. This room was very tall, so some were even flying. As Mira looked up, she realized the Drala may also be where dragon shapes came from. The shape was similar, and seen in the sky with nothing to compare their size to, they might seem much larger than they are. Deno showed her how to use the various apparatuses and machines. There were still a lot of stares and what looked like sneers from the Drala. Mira finally whispered to Deno,
What's with them? Why are they so angry? And why does it feel like it's directed at me?
Drala actually have very good hearing, so before Deno could answer, the nearest Drala did.
Weakling!
He spat.
Why would the Federation leave such a weakling in our charge?
Mira's evenings had not been idle. She had been studying up on the races of her shipmates as well as the Imperia. The reason such a large being could fly was because its bone structure was hollow like a bird's. She also knew that the Drala prided themselves as a warrior race, so strength and fighting prowess are what moved them up the ranks. The claws on both hands and feet, as well as their sharp teeth, made them deadly. A falcon uses the speed of descent to deliver a nasty talon punch to its prey, but without that fall, the punch wouldn't work. Drala were much the same.
You think I'm weak because I'm smaller than you?
Mira asked the Drala who spoke.
You can't even defend yourself.
What about me makes you think I can't defend myself?
Mira questioned.
No claws, no fangs, no venom, you don't even have a thick skin.
He spat back.
So you think that you could fight me and win?
Of course.
Without using your claws? No need to be spilling blood.
Easy.
I do have one question first. When you break a bone, is it something that is easily fixed? I don't know how advanced your medicine is.
Dano answered.
We put a device over the broken bones, and it keeps them steady while sending impulses to the bone to speed healing. The bone is usually healed in a day or two.
Good. You should probably notify them of an incoming Drala patient.
The Drala all bristled at the audacity of this human. To the big-mouthed Drala, she said,
Strike me as hard as you can. If you fly, I'll dodge. But if you stand there to do it, I won't. You'll get a free hit.
She tapped her cheek.
Go on. Punch or backhand me as hard as you can.
Eager to put her in her place, the Drala wound up and backhanded her for all he was worth. The sounds of multiple bones breaking and then screams of pain filled the air. The Drala was clutching his arm, and Mira had a small red mark on her cheek from the slap.
The next time you try and dominate, intimidate, or otherwise look down on another race, do yourself a favor and see if there is any research available. If you had, you would know that not only is my world's gravity greater than yours, but that a human's bones are dense and nearly solid, whereas yours are hollow. The birds on my planet have bones like yours, and a human can break some of them easily with a too tight grip. Be glad that your injury is from you hitting me, and not from me hitting you.
Mira sighed.
Do you need help getting to medbay?
Another Drala spoke up.
No Chief Machinist Mate Mira. We will help take him.
There was a new respect in how they all looked at her.
Great. I've met the Galaxy Klingons.
Mira went back to her workout. A short time later, she received a message on her portable that the 3 leaders of the ship would meet with her tomorrow morning.